Hello Year 6 and welcome to today's English lesson. Now, what we are going to be doing today, job number 1, we are going to finish off reading Macbeth, so we've got a little bit more of the text to read. Then job number 2, I will introduce what you're doing for today's task. So you are going to be planning the story that you're going to be writing next week, but I'll go more into detail with all of that in a minute. Okay, let's go. Okay, so as I said, we're going to carry on reading Macbeth, and it's this modern retelling of it. So Macbeth was originally by Shakespeare, but we're reading this modern retelling by Andrew Matthews, illustrated by Toni. Now, just before we get into that, this is what we are building up to doing next week. So you are going to be writing your own story based on Macbeth, and that story is going to be called Lady Macbeth, the Untold Story. So it's going to be about the events that happen in Macbeth, but from Lady Macbeth's perspective. She's going to be the main character. It's still going to be third person, but it's going to follow Lady Macbeth. Whereas Macbeth obviously follows Macbeth, Lady Macbeth is going to follow Lady Macbeth. But before we start thinking about that, and today we're going to be planning it, let's look at the story, okay? So, last time we read, Macbeth had just gone and he'd visited the witches again because Banquo's son had survived. He was getting himself all worked up, and the witches had said that no man born of a woman will kill him. So he was like, well, no one's going to kill me then because everyone's born of a woman. And they also said that he will not be defeated until Dunesdane, I think that's how you say it, woods walks. And again he said, well, a load of woods and trees is not going to suddenly start walking. So again, I'm absolutely fine. So let's just read. I'll read the paragraph from the last section, then we'll go from there. Then at last, hope came to Macbeth's suffering subjects. Malcolm had tried to raise an army in England, and with Macbeth at his side, he marched his troops into Scotland. There the army was greeted by cheering crowds who longed to be freed from the tyrant Macbeth. First, Glamis Castle was captured and burnt, and then Malcolm's forces marched on to Dunesdane. To the despair of Macbeth's generals, he did nothing. Each time they advised him to go to battle, he laughed and said, I have nothing to fear, until the day that Birnam Woods walks to Dunesdane. Through the windows of the throne room, Macbeth could see the distant campfires of Malcolm's army. He raised a cup of wine to them. Fools, he jeered, you cannot overthrow me. A sound made him turn. A servant was standing at the door, wringing his hands and weeping. What is it? Macbeth asked gruffly. The Queen, my lord, said the servant. She is dead. For a long time Macbeth was silent, remembering the early years of his marriage, when the world had seemed bright. Life goes on day after day, but it means nothing, he said in a cracked whisper. It ends in despair and darkness and death. Macbeth did not sleep that night. He drank cup after cup of wine, but it brought him no comfort. Only the certainty that his enemies would be defeated and that he would remain unharmed gave him any hope. At dawn, an anxious-faced captain brought the king strange news. The enemy is approaching, my lord, he said. To conceal the strength of their numbers, they are hiding behind branches cut down from Birnam Wood. It looks as though a forest is on the march. My curse upon you witches, howled Macbeth. You deceive me. I have lost everything, but at least I can die like a soldier, with a sword in my hand. Go tell the servants to bring my armour. So at this point, Birnam Woods has started to march, so he's realising that the witches said that he wouldn't be defeated until that happened, and he didn't think that could, but it has. It was a short battle. Macbeth's army had no stomach for a fight to protect a king they now hated, and the soldiers began to surrender to Malcolm's men, first in a trickle, and then in a flood. Macbeth fought recklessly, as though he wished to be killed, but he hacked down opponent after opponent, shouting, You were born of a woman, as he delivered the death blow. At last, Macbeth found himself alone. He was resting against a cart, when he heard someone call his name. It was Macduff, striding through the smoke of battle, his broadsword at the ready. "I have come to avenge my wife and children," Macduff said through clenched teeth. "Stay back," warned Macbeth. "I cannot be harmed by a man born of a woman." "My mother died before I was born," said Macduff, his eyes blazing with hate. "To save me, the doctor cut me from her body." Macbeth threw back his head and laughed bitterly. He saw now that all the witch's promises had been lies, and that by believing them, he had betrayed himself. The force that had dominated him was gone, and only his courage remained. "Come then, Macduff," he cried, "make an end of me." Macduff struck off Macbeth's head with a single sweep of his sword. So Macbeth was thinking he couldn't be defeated because everyone was born of a woman, but Macduff said, "Actually, my mother died and I was cut out of her to save my life, so he wasn't really born of her in the same way." Carrying on. The head was placed on top of a spear that had been driven into the ground outside the gates of Dunsinane. The victorious army cheered, then marched away to see Malcolm crowned the king. And as the sun set, 3 ravens flapped down from the castle walls and fluttered around Macbeth's head. "All hail Macbeth!" they called. "All hail! All hail!" And that is the end of Macbeth. Gory story. It would have been like a bit of a horror story really back in those days. Yeah, they didn't have film or TV or anything like that. People would have gone to the theatre and this would have been like a horror story. So, as I said, next week we are going to write the version of a story that is from Lady Macbeth's point of view, okay? It's only going to go up to the point when she dies. And today we're going to plan it. So we're going to plan using a planning template, which I'm going to show you in a second. And it will follow the story of Macbeth. So your planning template is going to look like this. I realise this is quite small on the screen, but it's on the information sheet, which will make it much clearer. So what I'm going to do now, I'm quickly going to show you how I would see about starting to do my plan. Okay, let's go into my hand. Okay, so hopefully we've done our date and our learning objective. And then we are looking at getting this plan together so that we know what we're going to kind of be writing about next week. So in the success criteria, which I put in down here, it talks about all of the things that we should try and get in these notes. So I'm just getting it up on my screen in front of me so I can definitely know what it is that I'm meant to be doing. 1 second. Just talk amongst yourselves for literally 30 seconds. I have it. So we should be writing in note form, using bullet points and not complete sentences, including some key vocabulary that we need to get in there, identifying key settings and characters within each section, and including the opening paragraph is a could. So we could try and get that in there. So this first section that we're going to write about is at the start of the story. So at the start of the story, Macbeth is off fighting the Norwegian army, okay? Now, Lady Macbeth isn't there, okay? So we need to think about what Lady Macbeth will be doing during this period. So you can write down, so like, original event, Macbeth fighting the Norwegians. I feel I spelt the Norwegians wrong there. I apologise to any Norwegians that might be watching this and are offended by that. I'm sorry. Okay, so then we will include what we're going to put in our plan. Okay, so this is the Lady Macbeth story and this is our plan. So I would say whilst this is happening, in this section, I'm going to use some bullet points. I'm going to describe Lady Macbeth. Okay, so that's one of the things that I definitely want to do in this section. She's got dark hair. She's thin. Ambitious. Okay, I'm also going to describe Dunnesnane Castle, which is where she will be. Help if I can spell castle correctly. And then I'm going to talk about how Lady Macbeth feels lonely and unsatisfied with her life. Okay, so that's going to be like my opening couple of paragraphs. Well, I introduce Lady Macbeth. I talk about how she's feeling lonely, she's feeling unsatisfied. I'll introduce the castle that's going on. Okay, and then moving on a bit. In the original story, Macbeth writes a letter. Okay. And he describes that he's been made the thorn, that she met the witches, and he'd been made the Thor of Cawdor, I think it is. So in this bit, Lady Macbeth's going to receive the letter. I'm going to describe her greed and ambition in more detail, okay? And then she starts to form a plan. About killing Duncan. Okay? And like I've said, because this is called Lady Macbeth, I'm going to be focusing on these events. Okay, these are the bits I'm going to be focusing on. Now I'm going to stop there, but you can carry on. Well, you have to carry on in your work. And you've got all of the different events, and I want you to plan out what it is that you're going to write about in each of these different things, okay? Let's just come back to my face for a minute. So year 6, as is always the case with these planning lessons, the harder you work today, the easier it is going to be next week. If you don't get a decent plan done today, when it comes to next week and you're writing about it, you will find it difficult. You will be thinking, oh, I don't know what to write about, I don't know what to write about. And if you don't know what to write about, you're really going to struggle with how you write when you're looking at speech punctuation, different sentence structures, better vocabulary choices, all of that kind of stuff. So work hard today, and then you know what you're going to write about, and then next week when we come to write it, you will know. You'll know what you're writing, so you can concentrate on how you're going to write. Okay, I realise this has been quite a long video, but work hard year 6, let's get some fantastic plans done, okay? Goodbye.